only way they managed to stay hydrated was by using that fetid water and giving themselves an enema.
It was all fake? I trusted this guy. That was the reaction of millions when the truth about Man vs. Wild exploded online. From staged survival scenes to rented horses and luxury hotel stays, was Bear Grylls misleading us all along? Have you ever questioned how wild Bear's Wild really was? Could your favorite survival show have been nothing more than reality TV magic? We'll reveal the shocking deceptions, the whistleblowers, Bear's own defense, and what was really going on behind the cameras. This isn't just about one show. It's about how television blurs truth and entertainment. The fake first season. When Man vs. Wild first premiered in 2006, it felt revolutionary. A lone man, Bear Grylls, was dropped into some of the harshest environments on Earth with nothing but grit, ingenuity, and a cameraman. The stakes felt real. The danger felt immediate. And viewers were hooked. But that trust would shatter faster than a bone in a fall from a cliff. Because it didn't take long before fans began asking, was it all staged? The first major controversy hit in July 2007, just days after the Season 1 finale. Mark Weinert, a survival consultant who worked on the show, came forward with damning revelations about how Man vs. Wild had actually been filmed. According to Weinert, what you saw on screen often had little to do with reality, and sometimes it was the complete opposite. Take the Sierra Nevada episode. Bear is shown huddled under a rock overhang, struggling to survive the night in freezing temperatures with a tiny fire to keep warm. He narrates with urgency, explaining how the conditions could be deadly. But in reality, Bear spent the night not under a rock, but in a cozy suite at the Pines Resort in Bass Lake. The place isn't just a roadside motel. It boasts a full-service spa, fireplaces, hot tubs, and high-speed internet. So much for roughing it. And that's only the beginning. In that same episode, Bear stumbles upon a group of wild mustangs and proclaims what a rare and special sight it is. He even attempts to gain their trust and leap onto one, failing, of course. The scene is played as a real, spontaneous moment. But a Reddit user and several YouTube commenters quickly pointed out that these wild horses were actually domesticated and rented from a nearby ranch. One deleted video even showed how the horses were transported and prepped for the shoot, suggesting the whole encounter was orchestrated for drama. As fans and whistleblowers probed deeper into Season 1, cracks began to show more and more on the outside facade. Take, for example, the deserted island episode off the coast of Hawaii. Bear appears to be in dire straits, trying to survive in a harsh and remote environment, making a bamboo raft to escape. But Weinert says a team of builders put the raft together off-camera. Once finished, they took it apart so Bear could be filmed building it by himself. What looked like an exercise in ingenuity became scenery. A huge red flag popped up in Episode 5, where Bear is purportedly exploring what he called an active volcano. He walks among thick clouds of smoke, warning viewers about sulfur dioxide gas. Quite frightening, until you realize those white clouds were not volcanic gases at all. They were from smoke machines positioned off-screen. Insiders reported that even the glowing magma was faked with burning coals brought in by the production. Somehow, by now, even the casual viewers were beginning to notice some weird things. Why could the lava fields so easily access the parking lots? Why did some shots appear to be dangerously remote, only to reveal cars and guardrails just outside the frame? The illusion was falling apart. Hikers and locals alike correlated their experiences with Bear's heroic struggles. For most of them, It was not a wild adventure experience, but a forged trail or well-kept tourist areas. Some of the chilling lava fissures Bear negotiated could just be walked around. Some were so short that they only ran a few hundred feet and ended directly next to a visitor parking area. Not just disappointed, fans felt fooled. While the Discovery Channel continued to tout the authenticity of the program, there were brewing storms behind the curtains. The very next step would take Bear himself, who someday would face these very public repercussions. Because if this much was fake in just one season, what else was fabricated? Volcanoes, smoke machines, and stagecraft. If the first season cracked the illusion of man versus Wild, Episode 5 shattered it completely. This was the episode where viewers were told Bear Grylls was braving one of the world's most dangerous environments, an active volcano on Hawaii's Mount Kilauea. But once the truth came out, fans weren't just upset. They were stunned by how much of it was manufactured Hollywood illusion. Let's start with the smoke. In the episode, Bear walks through swirling white fumes, dramatically warning the audience of sulfur dioxide gas, a deadly volcanic emission. He holds his sleeve over his face. He coughs. The tension builds. Bear tells viewers that the gas is forming all around him, pouring out of the Earth's vents. But sulfur dioxide gas, as geologists quickly pointed out, is colorless. You can't actually see it. So, where was the billowing smoke coming from? Smoke machines? According to a crew safety advisor who spoke to the Sunday Times, the production team used special effects fog machines to simulate volcanic gases. What viewers believed to be a treacherous, toxic environment was largely an artificial setup. And while Bear acted like he was risking his life to walk through it, the danger was essentially non-existent. Then there was the magma, or at least what looked like magma. In one scene, Bear peers down into what appears to be a glowing pit of molten rock. He warns about the intense heat and tells the audience that one misstep could result in instant incineration. It's the kind of moment that gives the show its tension. But it turns out that magma was nothing more than hot coals brought in by the crew. Yes, red-hot barbecue coals standing in for lava. Even more egregious was how the terrain itself was misrepresented. Bear warns that crossing the lava field is dangerous because of unstable lava bridges, thin crusts of rock covering deep chasms. In one segment, he demonstrates how to navigate across these fissures, dramatically balancing and jumping across what appears to be a deadly gap. Then, a YouTuber named Volcano Chaser chanced upon the video and posted that it caught the whole sequence staged. The camera just behind the action revealed the fissure to be shallow and short, easily avoidable. In fact, the area was a very well-known tourist site, had paved roads, and a major highway a few hundred feet away. Bear could have just walked around the crack, or even driven past it. And of course, that was not everything. The episode boasts unique offerings: avocado trees and lava tubes, tropical forests, and fish-filled streams. Indeed, it paints a picture of a wide, untouched volcanic wilderness. Closer scrutiny, however, laid bare the fact that these scenes weren't even filmed in the same locality. Locals familiar with the area pointed out that the show had stitched together footage from different regions across Hawaii, some of which were 50 miles apart. The lava tubes in one area, the fish streams another, the tropical forest yet another. For someone unfamiliar with the island, it all looked seamless. But in reality, it was a Frankenstein montage of multiple locations sold as one cohesive survival journey. For the layman, the episode looked like a harrowing, audacious, volcano-ravaged ordeal. Locals and experts, however, declared it a well-cut television trick. At this juncture, The fans began seriously asking how much of the rest of the show could be trusted if the volcano episode was heavily faked. Bear was in isolation, less than 100 miles from civilization. The perils were staged with smoke and props. Viewers who had tuned in to learn about surviving the wilderness were now left considering, is any of it for real, or is it just reality television donning a camouflage jacket? And the answer was about to get even murkier. Because beyond the lava flows and smoke machines, it turns out Bear's most iconic survival stunts may have been even more staged than anyone thought. Snake meals, motel nights, and crocodile fear. If you've ever watched Man vs. Wild, you've probably winced as Bear Grylls bit into a snake or gagged down some insect larvae. These gross-out survival stunts were a big part of the show's appeal, proof, supposedly, of how far he'd go to survive. But once again, behind-the-scenes stories began to surface, and they told a very different tale. Let's start with one of the most iconic survival moments: eating a snake. In one episode, set in the Australian outback, Bear is seen catching a snake, slaying it, and eating it raw, including the skin, guts, and all. Viewers were horrified and fascinated. But according to Nick Romaine, a survival expert who worked with Bear on that episode, the entire thing was a composite of 2 snakes, and neither was caught on camera. Nick later explained that one of the snakes had been previously found dead near a roadway and was staged for the scene. The other was a live olive python that had actually been rehabilitated by a wildlife carer. When Bear caught and slayed it on screen, the truth was that the whole thing had been coordinated in advance. Nick didn't stop there. He claimed that almost everything viewers saw in the episode was scripted or pre-planned. Shelters weren't discovered and built by Bear, they were prepared in advance. "Everything you see in the show is set up," he said. And for fans who had believed they were watching raw, unscripted survival, it was a tough pill to swallow. Then came the crocodile encounter. In a different episode, Bear edges dangerously close to a crocodile-infested river. The scene is played for maximum tension. Bear crouches, whispers about how deadly crocs are, and prepares to risk it all by entering the water. Only, he never really did. Nick Romaine said that the set is completely false. "Crocodiles made the entire crew petrified," admitted Nick Romaine. Bear didn't want to get thrown anywhere near the water. Instead, they created a staged approach, so carefully constructed that it would look as if Bear was in striking distance of a crocodile. In reality, he was kept at a safe distance, far away from any real danger. Those reportedly grueling, sleepless nights spent in the wilderness by Bear. Not. Already, we know that Bear spent the night at a mere resort during the Sierra Nevada episode. Not an isolated incident. In the Islands episode, shot around Hawaii, Bear regaled his audience with tales of having spent the night on the sands. As usual, he stayed in a motel right next to it. The scenes of him roughing it in handmade shelters? They were shot during the daytime, and Bear reportedly returned to comfort each night. By this point, the people knew the pattern. It was beyond stretching the truth. It was putting on a performance with a choreographed reveal involving hotel breaks, safety crews, and animals brought and not found. Some will say this is the magic of television. For most viewers, however, it felt more like betrayal. The complete draw of all man versus. Wild is that Bear would appear as if he were alone in the wilderness, making a living off the land and pushing himself to the limits. That was an illusion, just a quickly fading one. To dampen matters, all these embarrassing revelations were piling on top of each other across internet forums, Reddit threads, YouTube exposés, and even some mainstream media. Bear's credibility was being torn apart, stunt by stunt, snake by snake. Eventually, the producers of the show could not remain silent, and neither could Bear. Something needed to be said, and he was preparing to say it loudly. But would it be enough to repair the trust he'd lost? Or was the damage already done? Bear Grylls breaks his silence. The backlash hit hard. With mounting evidence of staged scenes, motel stays, scripted stunts, and phony dangers, Man vs. Wild was under fire, and so was its star. Bear Grylls, once seen as a fearless adventurer, was now being labeled a fraud by fans and survival experts alike. The illusion of a lone man battling nature had crumbled, and now everyone wanted answers. For a while, Bear remained quiet, but eventually, the controversy grew too large to ignore. It was time for damage control. Bear made his first real statement on a live talk show, where he offered a mixed bag of admissions and defenses. Sitting calmly, he explained how the show was made over the course of 6 days for each episode. According to him, the survival segments were real, but not continuous. In his own words, "When I'm filming the live night stuff out, I'm out, whether that's in a camel carcass or up a tree. But when we're not filming the night stuff, I'll stay with the crew, wherever that is, whether it's in a tented camp area in the Sahara or a jungle lodge." That confession confirmed what many had suspected. Bear wasn't surviving full-time. He was dipping in and out of the wild, depending on the scene. And while that might be understandable from a production standpoint, to audiences who had bought into the myth of constant survival, it felt like a bait and switch. Then came the public apology. Bear released an official statement. "If people felt misled on how the first series was represented, I'm really sorry for that. I'm the person who takes the rap for these things, even though I'm not always involved in the editing side of it." It was a rare moment of humility. He didn't deny the allegations, he didn't point fingers. He took responsibility, even while hinting that the show's post-production team may have been partly to blame for how the series was framed. In response to the controversy, the showrunners took action. Starting with Season 2, every episode of Man vs. Wild opened with a disclaimer. Bear Grylls and the crew receive support when they are in potentially life-threatening situations, as required by health and safety regulations. On some occasions, situations are presented to Bear, so he can demonstrate survival techniques. The statement was quite in contrast to the tone of Season 1. Suddenly, Man vs. Wild was no longer pretending raw, uninterrupted survival. It was to be the educational entertainment, with drama and demonstrations. But the damage was done. Bear's hotel stays went viral as memes. Survivalist others, like Les Stroud, called him out. In a Reddit AMA, Les branded some of Bear's actions bogus, and only dangerous if really adopted by people in a crisis. That's hurtful stuff coming from a colleague, particularly one known for filming alone. Then the parodies began to spread like wildfire on YouTube, roasting Bear's most dramatic incidents. Jokes surrounding drinking piss, raw snakes, and all animated over-melting to fairly mild conditions became part of pop culture. Bit by bit, his image as the ultimate survivalist was morphing into something different, a meme. Some fans still defended him, arguing that Man vs. Wild was a teaching tool and not a documentary. In the end, it was about teaching survival techniques, not the reality of survival. Therefore, staging a few scenes was not so bad. Others, however, were not so easily convinced. For them, it was not good enough to just receive tips, that is, survival tips. They wanted the raw truth. And that truth, admitted even by Bear himself, was a lot more manufactured than anyone had been led to believe. This scandal was just the tip of the iceberg For when the dust was just beginning to settle, fresh accusations would spring forth involving trained actors, crocodile setups, and one very shady island. The more fans looked into it, the more fake it appeared. Stunts. So fake. Experts laughed. By now, the cracks in Man vs. Wild were obvious, but what came next didn't just disappoint fans, it downright embarrassed Bear Grylls. His stunts, once considered daring and death-defying, were now being picked apart by professionals. People who actually do this stuff for real. And what did they see? Left them laughing. Take the infamous rock climbing advertisement. Bear was featured climbing a vertical rock face in Utah, wearing a harness, shouting commands, and appearing to ascend a sheer cliff with nothing but grit and adrenaline. It looked intense, until an experienced climber named Justin Wallace posted a video titled "Cringe, Bear Grylls Confirmed Top Roper." Justin, who knew the route Bear was on, immediately called it out. He pointed to Bear's wrong gear, mocked the improper knots, and highlighted unsafe rope techniques. Bear's harness setup, rope coils, and the way he handled his weight were all textbook examples of what not to do. At one point, Justin even joked, "He's not climbing. His crew is hauling him up on a 3-to-1 pulley. There's no way he's holding his weight with that one hand in a crack. His feet aren't even touching anything." The comment section agreed. Climbers from all over chimed in with disbelief, frustration, and straight-up jokes. It was clear to them, Bear wasn't climbing, he was acting. But that wasn't the only example that had the pros shaking their heads. Let's revisit Bear's desert survival trick, squeezing water from elephant dung. It sounds extreme, and Bear performed it with gusto. He wrung a massive pile of dung into his mouth, telling the audience it could save their life in the wild. But to Les Stroud, host of Survivorman, the stunt wasn't just gross, it was irresponsible. During a Reddit AMA, Les broke it down. It's not possible to squeeze drinkable water out of elephant dung, unless your cameraman has soaked it with bottled water beforehand. He indicated that such stunts could indeed lead a person being shown such a stunt to actually worsen his chances of survival if the audience felt compelled to reproduce such a stunt. The move was, in his professional opinion, not only fake, but also amounted to dangerous misinformation. Then comes the crocodile part. In one episode, Bear set the scene near an African savanna river, whispering warnings in a crouched position, splashing about to illustrate the danger, fearing crocodiles lurking in the water. But here is the kicker. The crocodiles were actually brought in. According to the behind-the-scenes stories, the production team had 2 caiman crocodiles put into the water just for this particular scene. And Bear? He was never really close to them. The edit then made it look as if he were that close, but in actuality, he was quite far away from being bitten. Survivalists started to point fingers towards Bear about his methods, with one familiar message. Several of his acts are staged, managed, or completely dishonest. Shelters are built before shooting. Fires were lit before the event. Teams would build rafts and only disassemble them for Bear to build them on cameras. From one time being seen as about the rawest, most visceral depiction of the power within one to survive, it is now but another staged production, finely rehearsed, safety netted behind every leap. From an untrained perspective, it might seem real, but to anyone with a serious understanding of practical survival experience or outdoor credibility, absurd. Adding injury to insult was Bear's typically serious delivery. Breathless, earnest, and always on the brink of absolute disaster. So, double horrible is the contrast between acting and real safety. It was all there. The floats were not real. Yet still in their own hardline corner of the world were people who would watch, but now be cognizant of the fact that danger was completely manufactured. But just when it seemed the damage couldn't get worse, another scandal erupted. This time involving a completely separate show. And this one wouldn't just have fake scenes, it would fool people. Ordinary men, extraordinary deception. By the time Bear Grylls launched the island, many viewers were still reeling from the revelations about Man vs. Wild. So when this new series promised to strip away the production gloss and showcase what happened when ordinary men were left to survive on a deserted Pacific island, it sounded like redemption. Raw, honest. No tricks this time. Or so we were told. The premise was simple. 13 everyday guys, no camera crew assistants, no hidden luxuries, just their wits, some tools, and pure survival instinct. Except, that wasn't exactly true. Almost immediately, fans and journalists began noticing something strange. These ordinary men seemed remarkably skilled. Too skilled, in fact. And then, the truth started to come out. First up was Rupert Smith, one of the supposed average contestants. On screen, he was framed as just another participant, dropped onto the island like everyone else. But off-screen, Rupert had worked extensively in war zones and extreme environments, including alongside Bear Grylls himself on Escape to the Legion, another survival series. He wasn't alone. Dan Etheridge, a cameraman on the show, had also worked with Grylls on Man vs. Wild. And Keir McManus, a sound recordist, had more than a decade of experience filming in the world's most dangerous locations. All of these men were portrayed as regular guys, when in reality, they were seasoned survival professionals, some with actual ties to the show's production team. Channel 4, the broadcaster behind the island, defended the decision by saying that the crew was part of the experiment and were living under the same harsh conditions. But critics were quick to point out that this wasn't clearly communicated in the show's marketing. It blurred the lines between reality and production again, something viewers were already sensitive to. And then there was the water supply. In one dramatic moment, the cast discovers a murky pool of water deep in the forest. An emotional high point, a symbol of survival against the odds. But insiders later revealed that this pool was actually rubber-lined and pre-installed by the production team to make sure the cast had enough to drink. Let that sink in. The rare water source of the island was simply a planted prop that had been conveniently found by a desperate gang of men. The situation worsened with reports that 2 caiman crocodiles, once again deliberately placed, were actually released into the picture to provide some excitement. These were not indigenous creatures. They were introduced into the island ecosystem in a controlled manner for the sake of television tension. Suddenly, the notion of being untouched wilderness appeared far from it. More of a studio with sand. This was Man vs. Wild all over again, too many with a fresh coat of paint. Bear was not in front this time around, but he left his fingerprints all over the concept and the process. He had promised near-record authenticity. What they got was another scripted, guided, partly acted survival event, just with better marketing. Even survival experts weighed in against it. Critics would say that introducing fake predators, manufactured water sources, and experts who were planted would completely skew its definition of survival. It would create a false impression of what real people could do when put under such heavy pressure, but it would also make survival seem very easy to attain and more dramatic than it really is. This time around, there was no grand apology, no late-night talk shows employed for spin control, just quiet damage limitation from Channel 4 and an audience hastily losing faith in them. The moral? Viewers can only be deceived for so long, whether sleeping in hotels or planting crocodiles. Improbably, while the truth catches up quite fast. And yet, through it all, Bear Grylls managed to hold on to a core fan base. Why? Because to them, the fakery didn't matter. But to the rest of the world, it begged one last question. How real was Bear Grylls ever willing to be? Survival lessons or staged illusions? By now, it's undeniable. Man vs. Wild was not what it claimed to be. From luxury lodges and planted crocodiles to fake volcanic smoke and trained ordinary men, Bear Grylls' brand of survival TV had been ripped wide open. But even with the scandals exposed and experts laughing, one question still remains. Does the fakery invalidate the survival lessons the show tried to teach? To answer that, we need to separate entertainment from education. On the one hand, Bear Grylls did introduce millions of viewers to essential survival tactics. From building shelter and lighting fires, to navigating terrain and conserving water, the techniques themselves, at least the basic principles, were often genuine. Bear demonstrated how to use nature as a tool and how to stay calm in chaos. These lessons weren't entirely made up. But here's the problem. Context matters. If someone demonstrates how to survive a snake bite or build a raft, but does it under scripted, pre-planned conditions with a medical team 10 feet away, it changes the weight of that lesson. The danger isn't real. The stakes aren't real. And when the illusion of risk is part of what sells the lesson, the credibility is compromised. Take the infamous elephant dung water squeezing stunt. Yes, it's a real survival technique in extreme cases. But if that dung was pre-soaked with bottled water by the camera crew for effect, as some insiders claim, then what are we really learning? Are we being informed or manipulated? Survival specialist Les Stroud, who shot Survivorman entirely by himself, spoke best on the matter. Some of Bear's stunts would get a person slayed if tried in real life. That is not just a biting criticism, that is a caution. And that cuts right to the heart of this controversy. While Man vs. Wild self-advertised as educational, it blurred the lines with theatrics. It packaged itself as raw reality, but delivered controlled spectacle. The show may have begun with good motives, but in the end, those motivations seemed to warp under the pressure of rating, drama, and production gloss. Bear Grylls then becomes a bit of a fake? Not really. Bear has always maintained that he is an entertainer and a survivalist as well. He has accepted that part of the show is staged, staying in hotels, having crew support, and apologizing for misrepresenting at an early stage. And for some fans, that is already enough. They would argue that the point of the show was not to show how tough Bear was to inspire others. To show people how to think fast, adapt, and survive with or without the situations being 100% real. In this way, the show served a purpose. By engaging the younger audience in the outdoors, though, viewers congregated as families watching it together. And schools sometimes used clips to elicit discussions in classes about safety in the wilderness. The message, "You can beat Mother Nature with knowledge and willpower," still reached millions. But trust was much tougher to claim. The durability of trust for skeptics and survival professionals would be, Bear's bending of reality means one thing: you can't get away with calling it real when you hide the safety net. The survival genre calls for truth. When the entire genre loses that, everything falls apart. Now, Bear Grylls continues to host fairy tales and an adventure program, publish more books, and give talks all across the world. His following, though significantly smaller today than ever, remains staunchly loyal. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, hit that like button, comment your thoughts on Bear Grylls' stunts, and don't forget to subscribe. Want more truth bombs about your favorite shows? Watch the next video on screen right now. We promise, no smoke machines here.